We'll just do it now. Chapter 25, The European Connection. So, Mohomed Atta's American hosts, Rudy Deckers and Wally Hillard, are not who they pretend to be. But the same could be said of Atta as well. As we've seen, he exhibited behavior which is totally inconsistent with that of an Islamic fundamentalist. However, broadly defined, but his behavior was consistent with that of a member of his Arab society's privileged elite, who also happened to be a spy. The people he consorted with in Florida, his Florida associates, were not exclusively, but perhaps even predominantly, Arab. From information gleaned first in interviews with Amanda Keller, Atta's one-time American girlfriend, and corroborated by independent sources in Venice and Naples, we confirmed that at least 7 of Mohomed Atta's close associates in Florida during the year leading up to the 9/11 attack were European, German, Swiss, and French. Today, we know at least something, but by no means enough about the identities of each. Their names haven't surfaced in any press accounts about Atta's stay in the U.S., nor has their existence been mentioned or alluded to in official statements. We know they were all pilots. I need something to drink. According to Amanda, all of them already had pilot's licenses from other countries when they arrived in the U.S. traveling with Atta, or meeting him around the state. Atta's European friends appeared to share relationships with him of long standing. Their meetings were serious business. When they returned, said Amanda, Atta and his German associates always came back glum. One of the 7 still resides in the U.S., 5 live in Germany or Switzerland. The 7th has a criminal record in his native Germany and today lives in Saudi Arabia. Cab driver Bob Simpson referred to Rudy and Mohomed as partners in crime. He thought the 2 men shared both social and business connections. He said they were very close socially, as we've seen in one pickup during the summer of 2001. Simpson drove them to Sarasota to a bar on Main Street. Amanda had made frequent references to a close friend of Atta's named Wolfgang. A friend so close to Atta called him my brother. He called certain people, Arabic people, my brother, Amanda said, and I was wondering how he had so many family members. Like gang members do, you know, this is my brother, but not all Arabs. So it wasn't like anyone who was Muslim was his brother. He called Wolfgang and Jürgen my brother, she said. He and Wolfgang were very tight. They went everywhere together. When he came into the picture, they were together all the time. Keller said Atta always spoke German with Wolfgang, which contradicts the testimony of Rudy Deckers to a congressional committee that when he addressed Atta in German, Atta merely looked at him strangely. Wolfgang's story, according to the people we spoke with who knew him, includes a life studded with things like sailing around the world on a 47-foot yacht, on a trip where he met his wife Surajita, a native of Bombay. But when he went looking for Wolfgang, we found him through records of his scrapes with authorities in Florida. In airport records in Naples, he was referenced in Aerojet ambassador correspondence. A letter was sent by a former employee soliciting to offer private flight instructions without authority and in violation of FAA rules. Wolfgang Beauringer is a pilot in his 30s. In spring 2002, he became a naturalized U.S. citizen. He was one of the first of the German element to arrive in Florida in 1996. When he opened a flight school in Naples, Prior to arriving in Naples, he was associated with an organization called the Flying Club of Munich in Augsburg, Germany. Like Rudy and Wally, Wolfgang was notorious in aviation circles for bad behavior. Wolfgang showed up from Munich in the mid-1990s and immediately began operating a flight school illegally, stated Marcus Huber, a flight instructor in Naples. He's half Swiss, half German. Also like Rudy and Wally, Wolfgang seemed to have a hall pass from federal authorities. This embittered other foreign flight trainers not similarly well connected. When Wolfgang applied for an E2 visa, he made up a fake company, a cleaning service, Huber told us. Sometimes it makes me mad that a criminal gets preference. Welcome to Terrorland. Wolfgang was instrumental in bringing another of Atta's German associates to Florida, a pilot named Stephen, who has done jail time in Germany, was on parole when he came to the U.S., and thus not supposed to be flying. But being connected means never having to say you're sorry. And while regular German flight students struggled to obtain the necessary visas, Wolfgang and Stephen had inside connections which smoothed their process. Stephen purchased Wolfgang's flight training business. Two other close German associates of Mohomed Atta's in Florida were brothers, Peter and Stephen Verhaeren. Stephen did 8 months of jail time, Huber told us. He was convicted October 1st, 1997, and released from parole in November 2000. Wolfgang signed off on Stephen's books, and so Stephen also got in on a fraudulent business investor's visa. Yet Stephen was running a Florida flight school, although there are more than a few laws that say he shouldn't have been. Presumably the FAA was looking the other way. Stephen today reportedly flies in Saudi Arabia for a Swiss carrier, Farnair. Atta also was often seen with Rudy's head flight instructor, Francois Nicolai. He's another guy with no papers, an aviation source told us, but at least he's an excellent pilot. He's French and Swiss. From what she saw, Amanda said that all of Atta's friends, with the exception of Marwan al-Shehi, were either German and Dutch, including Dutchman Rudy Deckers and Arnie Kruithoff, and another man from the Netherlands named Paul. There was also Arnie Kruithoff's agent from Munich, as well as his business partner in aviation aspirations, Pascal Schreier. Pascal was close to Beauringer, Atta's closest friend among the German nationals. Pascal Schreier is married to a woman named Sandra Hamoda, French-Tunisian, who, as we have seen, brought the bankrupt flight school in Punta Gorda, where Atta hung out in early 2001. She is an executive with a Florida flight school called Pelican Flight Training Center, a fact we might have overlooked except for a curious coincidence. When the New York Times did a 2-year anniversary story on 9/11 called Hard Times Are Plaguing Flight Schools in Florida, Hard Times Are Plaguing Flight Schools in Florida, September 14, 2003, focusing on the fact that pilot training schools in Florida have been struggling since 9/11. The two schools profiled in their story are Magic Dutch Boy Arnie Kruithoff and Pelican Flight Training Center, where Pascal Schreier's wife works. There are over 220 flight schools in Florida. That the New York Times profiled these two well-connected schools is no doubt just a freak coincidence. Another old friend of Atta's was a German named Jürgen, who was not the smoothest of operators. Jürgen was a pervert, straight out, Amanda had said. He was a lush mid-30s. Every woman that walked by, he had something to say to them, commenting on their butt or whatever. He would go up to a woman, say, "I'm from Germany and I want to touch an American woman's butt." We may have found Jurgen working as a realtor in nearby Sarasota. Amanda recognized him from a picture in a Yahoo Swingers profile. Kurgus Jurgen is the owner of Europe One, a company whose Florida incorporation papers lists the phone number of the Continental Cafe in Sarasota, a fictitious business name of Casablanca Rose Incorporated, whose two directors are Abeltif Mamdoua and Mustafa Etaki. Although he did tell us unprompted that he knew many people in the FBI, Jurgen denied knowing Atta, and because we don't have a second source for the identification, we have to leave open the possibility that Amanda's photo confirmation was an error. But not everyone has business partners named Abeltif and Mustafa. The fact that Atta was being subsidized by U.S. taxpayers while he was in Hamburg hasn't been played up anywhere that we know about, but it's true. For at least 4 of Atta's 7 years living in Hamburg, he was part of a joint venture between the U.S. and German governments, an elite international exchange program run by a little-known private organization which has close ties to powerful American political figures like David Rockefeller and former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. This fact has escaped notice as well. Before becoming a terrorist ringleader, Atta enjoyed the patronage of a government initiative known as the Congress Bundestag program, overseen by the U.S. State Department and the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the German equivalent of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The jointly funded U.S.-German government effort picked up the tab for Atta on sojourns in Cairo, Istanbul, Aleppo, and Syria during the years 1994 and 1995, as well as employing him as a tutor and seminar participant during 1996 and 97. Atta's financial relationship with the U.S. government program probably extends back to his initial move from Egypt to Germany in 1992. The news that Mohomed Atta had been on the payroll of the elite international program only surfaced in a whisper, just as quietly as news that Venice flight schools had trained a third terrorist pilot. It was in a brief 7-line report by German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung on October 18, 2001, under the headline, "Atta was tutor for scholarship holders." The story quoted spokesman for Karl Duisberg Gelderschaft, described as a German international further education organization, as having admitted paying Hamburg cadre Principal Atta as a scholarship holder and tutor between 1995 and 97. This is why George Webb calls him a Duisberg scholar. Mohomed Atta, the Duisberg scholar. When we found it, what seems to make this story especially curious is that the German paper concealed the truly shocking implication of their story, that Mohomed Atta had been on the payroll of a joint U.S.-German government program. They did this through the simple expedient of neglecting to mention in the article that the Karl Duisberg Gesellschaft was a private entity administering the exchange initiative of the two governments. And we gotta know, Mr. Duisberg was an AIDS researcher and somebody just dealing with a lot of biological research. And what happened right after 9/11, the anthrax scare? If you were associated with a Duisburg scholar working with biologics, you might want to look at Atta a little bit more closely. Maybe they forgot. The U.S. end of the program, we discovered, is run out of an address at United Nations Plaza in New York by the U.S. arm called CDS International. The letters stand for Karl Duisberg Society, also the name of its German counterpart in Cologne. The Karl Duisberg Gesellschaft, they are named for the German chemist and industrialist who headed the Bayer Corporation during the 1920s. Maybe the Duisberg, the AIDS aspect I may be mistaken on, but Bayer Corporation, working in biologics. The list of elite power brokers backing CDS, or what did CDS stand? Karl Duisberg. I just read this. How did I forget this? Karl Duisberg Society, okay. The list of elite power brokers backing the Karl Duisberg Society International ranges from the aforementioned Kissinger and Rockefeller to former President Bill Clinton and other Democratic heavyweights like former First Lady Hillary Clinton and Clinton advisor Ira Magaziner. Kissinger showed his support by addressing over 100 international business leaders at an anniversary dinner organized and celebrating Karl Duisberg Society International held at the River Club of New York, June 2nd, 1987, where he congratulated Karl Duisberg Society International on its 20 years of service in keeping close business ties, not only between Germany and the United States, but its more recently career development programs for participants from other countries as well. 5 years later, Mohomed Atta became a participant from one of these other countries. Then President Bill Clinton also found a lot to like about Karl Duisberg Society International during his visit to Germany to commemorate the Berlin airlift. He noted that the United States will be working hard to expand our support for the Congress Bundestag exchange, which has already given more than 10,000 Germans and American students the chance to visit each other's countries. Were he to give the same speech today, he would no doubt amend the wording to read, visit and vaporize. Karl Duisberg Society International states the organization's literature provides opportunities for young German engineers. Mohomed Atta wasn't strictly speaking a young German engineer, but apparently Kissinger's praise for career development programs for participants from other countries as well had been taken to heart. These young German engineers earn real-world experience and are given assignments to contribute from the start, a program spokesman enthused in a newspaper interview. The organization is today understandably shy about mentioning that their most famous recent graduates' real-world experience included murdering almost 3,000 people in New York City in slightly less than 2 hours. A financial relationship between the terrorist ringleader and the U.S. and German governments has not previously ever been hinted at in American. Butchered that. Starting over. A financial relationship between the terrorist ringleader and the U.S. and German governments has not previously ever been hinted at in America's major media. The conspiracy-minded might conclude that this may owe something to the program's raft of politically powerful boosters giving it big juice. We prefer to think of it as an oversight. Having big juice may also explain omission in the story about Mohomed Atta's time in Germany in the March 7, 2003 Chicago Tribune. Under the headline, 9/11 haunts hijackers, sponsors, German couple talks of living with pilot Atta. The article described in 1992, meeting in Cairo between Atta and German couple running an international student exchange program. Atta was recruited in Cairo by this mysterious German couple, dubbed the hijackers' sponsors. It was this meeting, said the Tribune, which led Atta to move to Hamburg. But although Tribune correspondent Stevenson Swanson cites this German couple for having played such an important role in Atta's move to Germany, he never gives their names nor that of the organization they worked for. We thought good journalism was all about, who, what, when, where, and why. The Chicago Tribune got unaccountably stuck on who during a visit to the Egyptian capital in fall 1991. The Tribune reported the German couple stayed with friends who knew Atta's father, a Cairo lawyer, and his father's friends had then introduced the German couple to Atta. Atta, who had recently graduated with a degree in architectural engineering from the University of Cairo, told the couple he wanted to study architecture in Germany, but he had no particular idea where he should go, the paper reported. Though the article neglects to mention it, the reason Atta found himself with no particular idea where he should go was that although he studied engineering at prestigious Cairo University, he hadn't done well enough to gain admission to its graduate school. The paper quotes the German wife telling investigators, "In this first conversation, we suggested he continue his studies in Hamburg and offered him a place to live at our house. Atta," she states, accepted their offer right away. This magnanimous gesture by the German couple to an undistinguished young man they have just met may be normal behavior for this couple. Perhaps their gesture was just the very milk of human kindness. Then again, perhaps it is something else. Why did this German couple leap at the opportunity to help a young man not considered promising enough to gain entrance to graduate school in Cairo, offering him a place to live at their own home? The Tribune doesn't say. It also fails to identify either the couple or the international program they ran. The story is 1,200 words in length, so it's not as if they didn't report the names for space reasons. Jane and John Doe from Help A Student International would have sufficed. Just an extra 10 words and they would have had it, who, what, when, where, and why. Either the Tribune just forgot who or something more sinister occurred. After studying German in Cairo, Atta arrived in Germany on July 24, 1992, according to investigators' records, and then lived rent-free for at least the next 6 months in the couple's home in a quiet middle-class neighborhood. Since just 3 years later, Atta was on the payroll of the Congress Bundestag program, it is reasonable to include, no thanks to the Chicago Tribune, that this was the exchange program responsible for bringing him to Germany in the first place. Karlsruhe Society International's elite sponsors are apparently influential enough to have kept their organization's name out of the newspapers, or at any rate, out of the Chicago Tribune. Here's something else we found curious about reports of Atta's time in Hamburg. When he returned home for a 3-month visit to Cairo in 1995, it was just as the Egyptian government was beginning to crack down viciously on Islamic fundamentalists. Yet, strangely, Atta chose this exact time to grow a beard, traditionally a sign of a devout Muslim. It is assumed that Atta did this as a defiant political gesture to register his disgust at the secular elite that ruled his homeland. At least, That's the way they tell the story. Atta's two German traveling companions report that Atta said he would not be cowed by his home country's fat cats, who he believed were criminalizing religious traditionalists while bowing shamefully to the West in foreign and economic policies. At least that's what they said, he said. At least that's what they say, he said. Excuse me. A more plausible explanation might be that growing a beard and assuming an Islamic fundamentalist pose was the act of a man singing for his supper by going undercover on behalf of people who were paying his room and board in Hamburg. I fucked up the flow of that. A more plausible explanation might be that growing a beard and assuming Islamic fundamentalist pose was the act of a man singing for his supper by going undercover on behalf of people who were paying his room and board in Hamburg. Made a little more sense. That's it for today. I've read quite a bit today.